It's time for Paleo Radio, only on Secular Media Network.
You are now entering Paleo Radio.
Welcome to Paleo Radio with your hosts Jeremiah Bannister and Joe Elder.
Welcome to another fantastic episode of Paleo Radio, live here in studio. My name is Joe Elder.
I'm the daytime dictator, Jeremiah Bannister.
And again, this is Paleo Radio. Thank you guys for joining us.
Yes.
You can call into the conversation, as always, 616-656-1680. It would be a wonderful thing if you did join us. Speaking of wonderful things, we are live on Monday, JB.
Man, look at all the changes that are going on. Look at all the things that are happening. I mean, the mere fact that people right now driving on the street, people right now, first shift workers on Monday, right, doing their thing. These people, they're now able to tune in live.
Yes.
And they can hear us live. You can hear us online. Go to publicrealityradio.org. And again, you can call 616-656-1680. But not only, Joe, are we on live right now at 10 o'clock, but we're on live for 2 hours.
Yes, we have our 2 hours. Those people that have been asking for it, we have got the answer. We got our extra hour. We're very happy about that, very excited. And that means more content, much more content from Paleo Radio every week.
Well, and here's the amazing thing. It's the cherry on top. But the mere fact that we're on from 10 to noon on Mondays, we are also given a replay from 10 until midnight on Mondays. So
Yes.
If you miss the show live, do not let your heart be troubled. You don't even have to wait until it goes up on the podcast. You can simply tune in later that night if you're local, 95.3, 1680 AM, or if you're online, publicrealityradio.org, and you can listen to the show from 10 o'clock at night until midnight.
Yes, what a great treat. We're really excited about this. This is just a fantastic thing for Paleo Radio. You guys asked, we delivered. We're really happy to have that extra hour. And with it, we have more topics, great topics. We're going to start off with media looking for a Trump person, kind of an open invite, right?
It is kind of an open invite, and it's an interesting one. They're looking for a Trump apologist, and I think this actually kind of gives people an insight into why the media is not doing so well anymore.
Why it's kind of garby.
Why it's a little garby. Yeah. And then after that, we're going to talk about the Pentagon. Apparently, there was an investigation into the Pentagon regarding some loot and a lot of waste going on.
Uber waste.
Yeah, Uber waste.
Enough where the Pentagon wasn't really sure they wanted to let everyone know how much waste was going on.
Oh, they went out of their way to try to hide the fact that went on.
Yeah, so we're going to cover that. We're also going to get into, for all you conspiracy theorists there, get on your tinfoil hats for Pizzagate, which is the John Podesta emails, Pizzagate. There's plenty connected to it. We're going to just kind of explore it, what's reasonable about it, what's probably not reasonable, kind of break that down. That should be a very fun time.
And in that segment, we're going to do something different that we've never done, Joe. Not even back when we were doing Google Hangouts together, doing those live shows from the house on video. Mm-hmm. We're citing InfoWars.
We are going to cite InfoWars.
Yes,
but correctly so. And I've always used the saying, take it or leave it, right? But a blind squirrel can find a nut. And InfoWars was the one that was the leader on talking Pizzagate. Now, we're going to talk about the legitimacy of it and all of that as well. It's tons of stuff that's going to encompass that topic, so it should be fun.
And related in a way is Russian hackers. There was a secret CIA memo that was put out, investigation was put out, where anonymous sources are saying that they have even more definitive proof than before that Russia was engaged and that they wanted Trump to win.
Yeah,
it doesn't name anybody, but we're going to talk about that.
Yeah. And that should be very interesting, especially with some new developments where there's assumptions that the Russian hackers may have actually had access to RNC files and withheld them, that's an interesting claim. Boy, we have a lot to get into there. And then we're going to be talking about Rio and how Rio was hoping for a big economic boom post-Olympics, but like many Olympics, it never came.
Yeah, and it's not just that, though. I mean, it's not simply the stuff that people could have learned on John Oliver's show, but also all of the different things that are going on, right? And there is an underreported South. There is something to that claim.
Absolutely.
There's an underreported South that we don't hear too much about South America and certain countries, and that there's all this craziness going on. And listen, you talk about craziness, this topic here, and there's no order necessarily to what we've just said, but right here, this topic's going to be a lot of fun. Flat Earth.
Yes.
Yes.
And 10 easy ways to know that the Earth is not flat.
Yeah, 10 easy ways to know that the Earth is not flat. And these are ways that are accessible. These are things literally that you can do by yourself even, and coordinate with other people maybe on social media that live in different parts of the world, and do little tests for yourself to demonstrate exactly just how not flat the Earth actually is.
And because the state of discourse and logic is so deplorable, for the lack of a better word, that we actually think we do need to do this and give people some serious evidence as to why the planet is round. So, yeah, we're going to jump into that. Another little fun or small mixer that we've got is Snaketivity. That always happens this time of year. We've got the Snaketivity event that's going on with the Satanist group that wants to put up a idol, if you will.
a little idol, and you got KFC, they're coming out of the can. We got tons of amazing topics. We've been doing amazing things. And listen, it's a different feel, honestly. The entire layout of the show, to say you got 2 hours now. And I was talking to my wife, Joe, about this. I'm like, it was weird. Not only is the day that you have to prepare for the show changed, and we did this, we wanted to make sure that our weekends were flexible, because we like our adventurous lifestyle and we like to go out and do things and spend time with family and everything else. And so we wanted our weekends to just be free, where we could do this. And it's just an amazing thing, because now you sit there and you say, well, now you got a whole bunch of topics that you're going to be able to cover. And on top of it, you're able to cover longer the topics that you enjoy.
Yes, and we have a time frame that's developed so we can have some calls, we can have some people in here. Eventually, we're going to adapt this into an interview show where we try to have someone on for at least a 15-minute segment, possibly more, every week. And we're going to be we're excited about getting that number of people, getting a pretty high-ranking sort.
I've tried reaching out already. I've been trolling the daylights out of people.
Yeah. We're going to troll them into submission.
We're going to troll them into coming on the show. It's going to happen, TJ.
That's
amazing
right.
Atheist, my twin that's hiding from the world.
Your doppelganger.
Refuses to go on to Maury Povich to prove he's not my brother. Totally ridiculous. You're going down.
It is.
So, but we've got tons of great topics, Joe.
Yeah, we do. We'll kick in with mainstream media puts out the call for a pro-Trump columnist. Mm-hmm. This is by WAPO, and it's by Paul Farhi. Forgive me if I said the name incorrectly. Yeah. Begins with, it's not an actual want ad, but it might as well be one. As they discovered during the long campaign season, the nation's newspapers and major digital news sites, the dreaded mainstream media, are facing a shortage of people able or more likely willing to write opinion columns supportive of the president-elect. So we're running into a problem there.
Yeah.
Major newspapers, the Washington Post, New York Times, have struggled to find and publish pro-Trump columns for months. So have regional ones, such as the Des Moines Register and the Arizona Republic, which have a long history of supporting Republican candidates. Mm-hmm. So there's a bit of a struggle getting a pro-Trump columnist to come on.
Yeah, but see, here's the thing, though. The way that they're looking, and they kind of tuck it in later. We'll deal with this later and mention how USA Today is doing it differently than other places. But for people who don't understand, when they're talking about what major newspapers are doing, like the Washington Post or the New York Times or the Des Moines Register or Arizona Republic, those places, they're looking for committed columnists.
Yeah.
They're not looking for somebody to say, well, hey, I agree with Trump on this policy or that policy, and taking whoever's writing really good arguments in defense of policy X, Y, or Z. What they want, and I wish I remembered the guy's name, man, off the top of my head. I'm not surprised that I don't. But the guy from CNN, who's literally a Trump apologist, everything. It does not matter. His job is to defend Trump no matter what. And you look like a clown. I mean, it's not even real. That's the whole thing, is it forces somebody into a position where they're kind of a shogun. Mm-hmm. That's it. They're a shogun for that position. It's not really that they believe it. It's that they're peddlers of the argument.
Yeah, they want a Kellyanne Conway in writing.
They want an apologist.
Which is what that is. I mean, when you have the people that are coming on where, Trump makes a statement about jobs, and he says that, we're losing jobs by the millions. Or, better yet, when Trump said Obama created ISIS, right? Now, Trump just said that Obama created ISIS. That's really all the detail he put into it. Now you have a Kellyanne Conway who comes up and said he didn't say he created ISIS. He said his decisions in foreign policy have created the vacuum that made ISIS come in. And she's the one who breaks it down and details it in a way that's actually more palatable for the American people. And they want that to be someone who's going to do it in writing. But again, talking about the status of media, you're looking at people saying, we want someone that no matter what, almost on any given topic, is going to just defend Donald Trump. And that's going to be somehow objective.
Can you imagine being that guy?
Blah.
Dude, every day you'd be sweating bullets.
Well, you would know.
Every day you're like, oh my gosh, what am I gonna be doing today?
You're talking yourself in circles, right?
Oh my gosh. It's just unbelievable. But yeah, the idea, Joe, that people... That's how it works, but here's the thing is that's exactly how the mainstream media really kind of works. A lot of it,
Absolutely.
Not all of it, but the fact that they're even looking for that person instead of saying, we're looking, if you are just an everyday person, you might not even like Trump, but you might like one of his policies on a different thing, and you make a really compelling argument. You're using numbers, you're using data, you can have people from across the aisle. I mean, in fact, certain publications, I don't know if it was the New Yorker or what it was, wrote a piece called Intellectuals for Trump that actually had people who are intellectuals. They're not going to agree with him on everything.
Of course not.
I mean, that'd be absurd, especially for an intellectual. And so for mainstream media sources, I think that they're looking for a dinosaur to fill a dinosaur position. And I just don't think think it's working.
Well, and I don't think they're adapting to it. Where people have naturally come to the conclusion of tokenism. They've noticed that tokenism is real, like Alan Combs on Fox News. Yeah. He's their token Democrat, right? Or, that is the system that we're playing in right now, where Combs is supposed to be the representative of all Democrats. Or what was it, Bob Beckel?
Yeah, I was just going to bring him up. Bob Beckel, the guy with the suspenders.
And he just kind of humps over on his desk, right? That's
with his arms crossed all the time.
But in media theory, up until right now where it's been questioned, that's been just the basic standard setup that you go with. You have a conservative right-wing ideology in your entire news network. You pick one Democrat, that's your standard token Democrat. And, hey, look, CNN does it, MSNBC does it the other way. They have a standard liberal system that they're pushing through, and they bring on their couple Republicans and say, hey, why don't you answer all the questions we have for the other side? And
it's talking point land.
It's talking point land.
I mean, think about this for a second. They're literally saying, listen, what we really want you to do is every day just be really up to par on the talking points.
Yes.
Because that's what the consumer wants.
Yes.
And I'm sitting there thinking, man, you folks just haven't learned jack.
Well, and maybe we've made a huge mistake. Maybe we've made a huge mistake by assuming you just take someone who vehemently defends one side no matter what, vehemently defends the other side no matter what, put them together, and people will come to the right conclusion. I challenge that. I think most folks don't come to the right conclusions on it. We need a more eclectic and more free-thinking group of thought there.
They really get uncomfortable. They really do. The leaders in mainstream media, they get uncomfortable when you have people like Buchanan and Bill Press, in the same room. Because what you have is you have someone on the hard left and someone on the hard right. And a lot of times they end up agreeing.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
And that's not a bad thing. It's a good thing to make agreements. It's a good thing to find the middle ground. It doesn't matter who the person is. It doesn't matter who the party is. Find the middle ground and make it work. 616-656-1680.
Join the club. Support our work by visiting patreon.com/PaleoRadio today.
Back to Eagle and Dragon.
Locking and popping my way into the studio, Joe. I liquid danced right under the crack of the door.
Oh, that's lovely.
I did. Hey, on Facebook, got to give a huge shout out to old Benjamin Blake Speed Watkins. Homeboy studied philosophy and mechanical engineering. And look, I went to his page. I did a little bit of the creeper thing. Went to his page and saw this link. It was hilarious. John Cena punches a teen out of his pants in Saturday Night Live's Karate Kid parody. It was hilarious, obviously, but it wasn't as cool, in my opinion, as the mind-bending article he shared from Mental Floss. And everybody's got to check this out. I tried thinking off the top of my head what words would be in here, and what it is 25 words that are their own opposites.
Ooh.
Yeah, and I encourage people, hey, if you know off the top of your head, and it's an honor system, so we're just going to assume here that you're not a cheater pants, you're not Pinocchio, right? You're going to go and you're going to, off the top of your head, you're going to know and identify one of the 25 words or more, if you know more, that are their own opposites. You can call 616-656-1680.
Yeah, and thank you, Ben, for being a follower, and thank you for contributing on our Facebook page and wall. You can do that by going to Paleo Radio or Facebook.com/Paleo Radio. Okay, continuing the article. Mainstream media puts out the call for pro-Trump columnists. Again, this is WAPO article by Paul Farhi. We're about halfway through it, so I'll just get back into it. He says, the general lack of Trump-supporting columns, however, puts newspaper editorial editors in an uncomfortable position. Most newspapers try to create a rough balance between left and right opinions in their op-ed pages, which feature staff and guest columnists. The idea has been to reflect a range of viewpoints, even if the newspaper's, quote, official position, as expressed in the unsigned editorials, tends to go in one direction. So they like to think of, this is what we're talking about by our tokenism. Yeah. Hey, we've got one op-ed article or one op-ed contributor that really disagrees with a lot of the fundamental things that we do, so we let them have their one op-ed, and that basically shows our fair and balance.
Yeah, I mean, again, you got to just imagine the guy in the room, like the lonely conservative dude in the room, and they're like, okay, Trump just tweeted this at 3 a.m, and everybody looks over at the table at that
Dan,
guy. And
what are you going to do about that, Dan?
Yeah, what do you think, Dan? Huh?
How are you going to spin that one, buddy? Yeah.
That's what it would be. He'd just be a spin machine.
Yes.
He'd be a robot spin master. That's all that would be.
And you can't say that Trump didn't make this harder for people, too. Because when you have a crash and burn campaign, particularly with what he said about PC, like I know that was the start of his campaign where he said we're not going to be politically correct. Yeah. But when you crash and burn the way you did, expecting sympathy from media it's not going to come fast. But also saying, I'm going to be a little reckless. I'm going to say a few things that are going to be kind of hard to explain, and that's going to be your job to explain it. That's a task that a lot of people don't want to be held up with.
James Bennett, the Times editorial page editor, he said, quote, we struggled to find voices that could advocate for Donald Trump's ideas. It was really unusual. It didn't help that the conservative intelligentsia lined up against him. He didn't have the people around him who were prepared to put together his arguments for publication. Now, here is the thing. That is a flaw.
Yes.
That's a flaw, James Bennett. You're old-fashioned.
Yeah.
Because when you say he didn't have people around him prepared to put together his arguments, like, I get that, but there are people out there who are putting together the arguments. And whether or not you like them, that's my point. I'm not saying that they're right. I'm not saying that it's accurate or that it's factual. I'm saying that there are people out there who are putting together the case who are outside the traditional fold. Especially when you got a campaign where you had 3 people working on one floor of this building.
Yes.
3 people. But of course you're not going to have somebody. You want one of those 3 people? He's basically saying, listen, there's a market of people who agree and disagree. And sometimes you might have a Democrat who agrees. Sometimes you might have a libertarian who agrees. Sometimes you might have a conservative who agrees. But it would require James Bennett of the New York Times. It would require James to go and to search those people out, or to have for their publication. This would be for any of them, Des Moines Register, for any of them, to open it up and say, listen, if you support policies or you defend statements and it's a trending article for the day, here is a tool that you can use as a writer, as a contributor, to submit articles that would allow us to funnel it through and find out which would be the cream of the crop and say, these would be good. These are good arguments. This is a solid writer, and maybe build a relationship with that person.
Yeah. And I think the work that needs to be done for it is what people aren't willing to look into. Plus, the other thing is it's wading through a lot of crap. I mean, to be completely honest, you're wading through a lot of garbage. And that's what they even mentioned in the article, is that in even more daring theory, the lack of advocates for Trump in the mainstream media helped create the breach that has been filled by the fake news stories. As it happens, conservatives seem to be the most receptive to fake news stories, especially those that attack liberals and Democrats. That one I'm not really – I have a bone to pick with that. I think that there's a big error to be made, especially people who tend to find themselves on the more liberal side of the argument, to assume that they are less susceptible to bad news. because they certainly are. Particularly things that Donald Trump has said where it gets dancing off into willy-nilly land, and that's liberal. That's liberal bias, where they say Donald Trump said he's going to round up all Muslims and take them into internment camps, and they'll share the crap out of that. Or how about Donald Trump's meme about him saying if I was going to run, I'd run as a Republican. Those people are so stupid. Da da da. We've all seen that. That's a fake meme.
Right.
That's not real. He didn't say that. So the idea that the liberal left is less susceptible to fake news, especially with the information we get from a guy like Jonathan Haidt, it's just not true.
Right. And you've got, in the article, it says there's no shortage of conservatives. But here's the problem. The list that they gave are almost all #Never Trump people. I mean, that's what they are. They're never Trumpers. You have New York Times, David Brooks and Ross Douthat. You've got Glenn Beck, Eric Erickson, George Will, Charles Krauthammer, Kathleen Parker, Jennifer Rubin, Michael Gerson. These people, it was in many ways a referendum on the right as to being a rejection of institutional conservatism as we know, which by definition, by name, self-description, in fact, is neoconservative.
Yes.
To say that is the big loser. Mm-hmm. That's even a bigger loser this year than Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
And that's a big deal. I mean, that's why they went running to Hillary. That's why they started endorsing like crazy.
This is an interesting question I just have for you. See what you think.
Yeah.
Do you think that this is the product of the public becoming more educated, or do you think this is the byproduct of a less educated public and just the natural outcomes of it? For instance, do you think that people have gotten more savvy and that's why this is changing, or do you think that ignorance is the reason why it's breaking down?
I don't know, because in some other arguments I talk about how we're much smarter than previous generations.
Yeah.
You know, I would say that ignorance on some things, maybe. You know, I mean, I don't think that I don't think that it was the intelligentsia that brought this about in a good way, right? I don't believe it was ushered in by academia and by well-researched literature per se. I think a lot of it was a reaction, and I think a lot of it was emotional. I think a lot of it was gut, instinctive, and in that sense, yeah.
And this is maybe a little bit off of that, but I do believe that when, we do the false equivalency game, or people say, this is bad, but the other group does this, and that's absolutely true. But I'll tell you what, the idea of being the conservative group that has been in for the last 8 years, where they said, we're going to purposely not do anything in government, and then say that government doesn't properly work, and say that people are incompetent, and they're incompetent because half the people that are playing the game, quote unquote, aren't even playing. But they'll say that will reinforce our point. That drives a certain frustration to people that makes people say that it's all just a big sham in a game and they don't like it. Mm-hmm. Now, that's a goal that conservatives were trying to reach, that they've absolutely got. They've reached that point. But I think it's important to say that when discourse fell apart, there is a time that you can put your finger on it when discourse fell apart, and it was in 2008, and when Barack Obama gets inaugurated, and heavy, high right-wing Republicans meet up and say, we are going to do anything that supports him in any way, and then we're going to charade, and we're going to go on saying that the government doesn't function in a proper way, and it's terrible, and then you have mixed narrative stories. Mm-hmm. It's almost like, maybe this is coming a little bit out of the air, but it's almost like the tobacco industry, where they're not trying to prove, back in the day when they wanted people to still smoke, the big tobacco industry, they didn't prove that tobacco doesn't cause cancer. They just put in enough doubt to make everyone just still infight and argue, and that is enough time to keep doing what you're trying to do. And I truly believe that in media, that's where people have reached. The point is, we see, here's one article saying that global change or climate change is one of the biggest concerns we have. Mm-hmm. Here's the other article from climatechangesahoax.com that says it's crap, and someone just says, well, look, I've got your counter to that. And I think people are just generally frustrated with the outlay of media. And the question I have, or the concern I have, is I don't really know if they're educated enough in civics to make the proper choices if we move out of the realm that we're already in.
Yeah, it reminds me, what you just said literally reminded me of an Onion article.
Yeah.
That, I saw this Onion article, and people got to check this out, and it plays into exactly what Joe was just saying. Facebook user verifies truth of article by carefully checking it against own preconceived opinions. This is by The Onion. Clarksville, Tennessee. Explaining that people need to be critical of the news stories that circulate on social media these days. Area Facebook user James Wheatley, 44, reportedly took the time to verify the truth of an article he came across Thursday by carefully checking it against the opinions he already holds. Wheatley told reporters he had to correct several friends on Facebook earlier this week after an investigation of his beliefs and individual political perspectives proved the articles they had posted to be entirely false.
Oh, man, yes. Preconceived bias rules the day, right?
Yeah.
Lovely article by The Onion there playing on that role. But that's very true. And preconceived bias play the role. I think the state of the media does too. But also an uneducated populace and one that doesn't understand civics is it reminds me of Ben Franklin when people said, what kind of government do you want to have? And he said, a republic, if you can keep it. Because he knew even then that intelligence, civics, the understanding of how the process works is inherent in the importance of it. And if people don't understand that, we're always going to be in these bad situations.
Summing it up with The Onion, it's pretty sad. But once I got in the habit of looking at articles this way, I could see just how many awful sites there are on the internet that don't even adhere to the most basic tenets of my individual worldview. So now I just disregard them completely. We'll be right back.
Now back to Joe and Jeremiah.
Thank you for tuning into Paleo Radio. Want to give a shout out to a couple of Twitter followers that we have. Isaiah Washington.
Yeah.
He has 3 talents, 2 brothers, and 1 goal.
Yeah.
That goal is to be accepted into the Air Force Academy and learn to fly, lead, and to become a new crew commander.
Best of luck with that.
Yeah, how cool
I'm
is
serious.
that?
Best of luck. I sincerely hope that you make those dreams come true.
Yeah, we absolutely
give it everything you've got. Never give up and keep on trying to achieve those goals.
That's awesome. And
yes.
Hey, man, half the time having a goal in the first place is the biggest challenge, right? The other is Mike Winfield, who says his everyday challenge is to prove that he's not regular. He loves the grind more than love, and we want to thank him for that follow as well.
Well, you're totally not regular. What's that? Wait a second. I gotta pull this one back for a second. Yeah. Regular.
That he's not regular.
He's not staying regular.
Yeah, I'm not. He's like, I got to prove to you that I'm not regular.
Prunes.
I have infrequent bathroom trips.
Prunes and fiber.
Get that fiber, cut that cheese, son. We know all about that here at Paleo
but listen,
Radio.
we know that you're not normal, right? We know that you're not regular. If you're listening to Paleo Radio, you're a freak and a geek. You're a foaming at the mouth Paleocrat. And we're just grateful that you're following us. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And again, too, this is a live show, folks. So if you guys want to contribute, call in 616-656-1680.
It's live if you're hearing us from 10 until noon.
Yes.
If you're hearing it from 10 until midnight, we are not live.
Thank you for that clarification.
We have a replay. We're on 4 hours a day now on Mondays.
Yeah, which is great.
10 to noon. And it's super easy. It's 10 to 12 on both sides of the AM FM. Or AM PM. You've got 10 to noon and 10 to midnight.
Yeah. So there's another article that we want to dive into, which is the Pentagon. Man.
Right here, man. The Pentagon commissioned a report on waste, and what they found was so bad, they tried to destroy it. This is by... Wow.
By that.
Yeah,
huh?
And this is actually, I saw this, I think I mentioned on another show, Jack Hunter. He used to be, his previous... incarnation was the Southern Avenger.
Oh yeah, yes.
He was the Southern Avenger in the past.
Yes.
And it's kind of a touchy thing maybe with him. It's a life that he lived before. He was a radio personality. He wrote for the newspaper. You could see him on YouTube. You could see him all over the place. He did a lot of really cool things. And then began working with Rand Paul. In fact, I think he co-authored a book or two with
Rand Paul. But
yeah.
he has had kind of a change of conscience.
Big time.
As he went on. Yes.
Big time. And, I mean, even what appears to be almost a detriment to numbers. I mean, and that says something about convictions.
Yes, it does.
I think he's a convicted individual. But the Pentagon commissioned a report on waste, and what they found was so bad they tried to destroy it. This is over by Rare News. There was a piece over at the Washington Post, Joe. Mm-hmm. And it said that last year, the Department of Defense learned of $125 billion and I'll let that sink in for about half of a second, in internal waste and inefficiencies, then sought to destroy the evidence of it for political blowback.
But boy, $125 billion.
That's a lot of loot.
That is a hefty change. Just let's put that into perspective a little bit. SNAP benefits in the entire United States cost $74 billion. So you've got two whole safety net food systems that you could have under that are being exploited. So people that have concerns with food stamps and people getting access to adequate nutrition, there's one for you there. The Pentagon spends almost double that in waste.
Massive amounts. And it says, despite being one of the, quote, world's largest corporate enterprises, end quote, the Department of Defense has never rigorously measured the speed, quality, or efficiency of its core operations.
Can you even believe that?
I can't believe what I'm reading, Joe.
But, this gets into the game of auditing the auditor, doesn't it? Where people, where the CIA is so good at being intricate, CIA, Pentagon, FBI, they're so good at getting into the intricate details and understandings of other people's work and looking for paper trails and finding all that mess, and they don't do it for themselves in no way, shape, or form.
Yeah, in fact, an independent auditing and consulting team, they just recently did this, and they measured 5 categories, right? So just think about what you just heard, that this has never been done before, right? And process that we're talking the Pentagon, and then say, this is an independent audit and consulting team, and this is what they did. These are the 5 categories that have never been looked at. Human resources, healthcare management, supply chains and logistics. Goodness gracious.
They've never looked into logistics.
Acquisition and procurement and financial flow management.
Wow.
That is just amazing.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Human resources, never.
Human resources.
How are things working in human resources? Don't know, boss. Never know.
Supply chain and logistics. You're talking about handling massive arms deals, right? That goes through the Pentagon. They're Boeing. What's going on with them? Carrier, all that. Yeah. That's going through the Pentagon. They don't even understand supply chains and logistics and how efficient they are at that.
Yeah,
that's scary stuff.
How efficient is your supply chain working? How good are your logistics with all this? Well, we don't know. We've never actually tried to analyze it.
Well, and isn't it funny? Isn't it funny the blockade that you walk into where people say, "Well, this is the cost of keeping us safe," and you're like, "Actually, it's $125 billion more than it should be, because the cost of keeping us safe is not this price. This waste is massive,
and that's huge." How many times have you heard that?
Always. When you hear it all the time,
especially you being anti-war. Right? Or at least, not being a pacifist, but being anti-war and saying, I'm critical of this. I hear it all the time from the military wing, the jingoistic wing, of American politics that say, well, this is the cost of freedom.
Yeah, the cost of freedom.
And you're like, well, there is a cost. I will grant that. I'm a taxpayer. I'm willing to pay the tax. I don't believe that is an unnecessary thing for the tax man to come and to take some loot in order to provide safety for us. But I would really like it if the people who are coming to do that and the people who are getting gobs and gobs of money, especially in a time when we're really hurt, big time, we're struggling in this regard, we have been for a long time, for them to have never once even measured to say, how efficient is this?
Yeah.
How effective are we being? How good are we at doing this job with this money? Yeah. And nobody, like the article says, they've never accurately calculated what they cost the taxpayers. Yeah. That's a big deal.
And how susceptible are we to waste or people taking advantage of us and fraud if we can't understand these systems and we don't recognize when money's being misplaced? If the CIA if the Pentagon isn't doing internal auditing to find out its cost ranges, then there could be rampant fraud of epic proportions. Someone could shave off $3 billion, Jeremiah, wouldn't even be noticed. $3 billion for themselves.
Yeah.
They could get a defense contract, have it signed for $100 billion. They push it over for $103 billion, and they save the $3 billion. There's no way of knowing that that's not happening.
And think about it. The entire budget alone was what, $585.3 billion?
So a fifth
was requested in there. Yeah. So a fifth of it.
And
1/5. Think about that level of waste.
Yes.
And what percentage would you as a taxpayer, would you say, okay, institutions aren't perfect. People make mistakes. Sometimes, with good intentions, we have multiple layers doing the same thing. That sort of a thing, right? That's part of that's integral to the whole thing. It's inherent to it, right? But you sit there and you say, that is what it's cost us. That is what it's cost the taxpayers, and it's 20%. What's the percent that is okay for you as a taxpayer? Would it be 3? Would it be 7? Would it be 20?
Yes.
Would it be 20%? One out of every $5?
Doing some quick math, according to this, if it's $125 billion, it's roughly 21% of all of the money that goes to it is wasted.
1 out of every 5. Just burn it.
A fifth.
Just burn it. Light it on fire. That's you're literally.
Is that acceptable? I'd say a range of 10, even with a huge institution, is borderline questionable.
Yeah,
5 to 10%, 10% being the threshold. We're double that right now.
Yeah.
In the article it says, the results of this report were so bad that Pentagon top brass had the report classified, erasing it from public view. So wow, look at that. That kept the House, Senate, and American public in the dark, so they could not threaten the Pentagon's immense budget, the largest military expenditure of any nation on Earth, at $585 billion.
Wow.
So think about that. The idea that they find out that the waste is there. They're using and handling money that's not necessarily theirs. I mean, it's taxpayer money. I know that's kind of a delicate game we can get into, like my taxes pay your salary. But in this case, it's the largest military expenditure in the entire world. Mm-hmm. And 20% of it is gobbledygook garbage that doesn't even make it anywhere. Yeah. That's a problem.
It said this report found that almost 25% of that budget goes into overhead and, quote, core business functions. The basics. That's overhead for personnel, human resources, logistics, and other functions. There are just 1.3 million active duty troops right now, the fewest since 1940. They're supported by almost as many people in massive back-end bureaucracy of 1,014,000. That's huge.
Huge.
That's massive.
Well, in looking at this...
So you have almost as many back-end bureaucrats as you do active military troops.
This is the interesting number I see where it says almost 25% of the budget goes into overhead. Mm-hmm. Well, almost 25% of the budget goes into complete waste. So what it costs for overhead is the amount of waste that the Pentagon is involved in.
Yeah.
25% for overhead and 21% roughly is waste. So almost the cost of running the business.
That's a double whammy. Yeah. Do you remember that show Press Your Luck, Joe?
I do not.
The show in the 80s.
Refresh me.
Where you had whammies and you had this board.
Oh, yeah.
And it would and it would do that and people would be no whammies, no whammies.
Big money, no whammy, no whammy.
Yeah, big money, no whammies. My dad was on that show, rode his motorcycle to California. But
how awesome
Yeah,
is
it's totally awesome. I think you can check it out on YouTube. There's actually a game for Press Your Luck. I don't know if my dad's on it. But, awesome. The thing is, like, you sit there and you say, look at all that money. Look at all that money that's just gone. That would have been able to cover people who are logistics and overseeing things and supply chains. But now it's a double whammy.
Yes,
it's a double whammy. It's like insult and injury. It's kicking a man while he's down.
What would?
Yeah.
And I know this is us picking on kind of the right a little bit here because of the rhetoric they use for these sort of things. But what would they say about a private company that has 25% waste? They're spending almost as much money in waste as they are for the overhead of running the business. What would they say?
Oh, it's got to go.
It's got to go. They would say the market wouldn't even allow that, right?
It's got to have competition, they'd say.
It does.
It's hurting because there's no competition.
Mm.
Then again, there's a good case to be made that they should have monopolistic control over certain things if they're protecting our country.
But you can still have independent, like this. This is an independent audit of the area, basically. Mm-hmm. This is an independent group that went in and looked at it, which is what we need more of. We need a lot more of that, it seems.
Yeah, and by the way, real quickly, you have tons of these contractors. They said an Army contractor costs $189,188 per year after salary, benefits, and other expenses. There's 199,661 of these people. In the Navy, there's 197,000 of these. They're 170,000 a pop. Air Force has 122,000. The cost for them is $186,000 a pop. I mean, this is huge numbers.
Yes.
Massive numbers of people, profiteers, that simply don't need to be there.
Yeah.
I mean, and conservatives would do themselves well if they took their argument and they allowed it to extend to its logical conclusion and say, boy, there's a lot of waste here.
Big government waste.
Big government waste, that we need to trim this down to what's essential and make sure that we've got the right things. But, man, do we really need that many contractors?
Yeah.
Do we really need to spend that much money per contractor?
Absolutely. I don't.
Is that what
it
costs?
So.
You know, and can it be done a different way? Do we even have to be there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who knows? I mean, there's a lot of different angles we could take to it, but certainly recognizing the fact that there is certainly a problem in the Pentagon with overspending and with waste, and we need to have everyone on board in the same direction, pulling the rope the same way, which is get rid of big government waste if we see it and we know it's there. We have to eliminate it where we see it.
We're going to talk about Pizzagate, 616-656-1680. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to Paleo Radio.
For debates, interviews, or speeches, contact PaleoRadioShow at gmail.com.
You love to hate 'em, you hate to love 'em. You just can't get enough of 'em, you sick freaks. Paleo Radio's on the air.
Dude, there's a huge conspiracy, Joe, going on. It's spreading all over town. I've heard rumors.
Oh, conspiracies.
I've heard rumors on the streets, dude, that I am, in fact, TJ Kirk.
Yeah, you are the amazing atheist.
I am the amazing atheist. In fact, I told somebody, there's somebody by the name of Skatron on Twitter.
Seems
Skay.
legit.
Yeah, it seems totally legit. And wrote, "Whoa, are you sure you're not just TJ?" And here's the thing, is that if you go on our Facebook page, facebook.com/PaleoRadio, if you go there, there is a picture, Joe.
Yes.
And,
a multitude of pictures.
A multitude. In fact, I think there's 9 altogether. I think something like that. I don't know. Of these pictures where people can identify, and I mixed them up, that are pictures of the amazing atheist and pictures of me.
Yes.
And I mixed them, right? And said, tell me
Who's
which
who?
ones, who's who. And, dude, I'm telling you, people who've known me for years, people who knew me since high school, people got it wrong. Even my wife, Angela almost got one wrong, where she sat there and she looked at it and she's like, well, yeah, that one, I think. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Like, is that your final answer? And so it's been a lot of fun sharing that. I'm still trying to connect with Maury Povich. We need to get on the show.
The DNA test. Make sure, see if you're brothers, man.
Yeah, well, I'm trying. I'm friends with Jerry Springer, but he's like, well, you know, you got to talk to Maury. It's more his.
It's kind of Maury's thing.
It's kind of his thing. He likes those tests in the manila folders.
Yeah, that's it's a big deal, those manila folders.
Yeah,
Maury.
so go and check it out, facebook.com/Paleo Radio. But listen, this is actually a big deal. We joked about it a couple times, Joe.
Yes, we have.
And I joked about it in passing and said that we weren't going to talk about it. But we are going to talk about it this week because some things have transpired. And what that is Pizzagate.
Yes. And so Pizzagate is basically, to break it down, in John Podesta's emails, now we can get into them tit for tat, fact for fact, but in John Podesta's emails, there was certainly some kind of secretive language in the WikiLeaks docs. And the language that was released, some people believe it's connected to pedophilia, right? That John Podesta was using secret language. It involved pizzas. It involved, saying different things, different cloaked, coded words in his WikiLeaks. And people have an assumption that it has to do with pedophilia. It's been linked all the way back to a pizza shop that's in D.C. where a lot of affluent pizza people visit. Yeah. There's just a whole sort of things have gone on in it. But is a lot of it assumption? Yes. I think it is. But there's still one thing that's a fact. John Podesta was using some sort of coded language when he was writing his emails that have been released by WikiLeaks. He was saying something with an alternative intent. That's a fact.
And multiple people used it, and it was pizza related. There's this piece, and I saw it in my news feed. I follow people across the spectrum. I do it on purpose. So I see Alex Jones stuff every once in a while. And I saw his thing as a video called Pizzagate is a Diversion from the Greater Crimes in Podesta WikiLeaks. It's by Alex Jones, and it's about a 9-minute long video. So I suffered it and watched it, and I thought, there's a number of things in there that ain't too bad, actually. That's not vouching for the entirety of his argument or him as a media personality or anything else. A very limited statement being made. But where he says, he doesn't blame people for not trusting the mainstream media. He calls them fake media. He calls them dinosaur media. That's his thing. But when you have this new alt media behaving like the mainstream media, it discredits them. And that's what he said. He said when you have the alternative media, you got new media that's going out and they are spreading false memes, which that happens, where they're conflating narratives. And I told somebody this. I said, for the right, both sides kind of have this pre-existing narrative that they're forcing Pizzagate into. The conspiratorial right, they have that age-old New World Order conspiracy that involves the Illuminati.
Agenda 21 and all that other
Agenda
jazz.
21, MK Ultra, things to do with child trafficking, things to do with pedophilia, things to do with sex cults, things to do with Satanism. All of that is tucked into the belief stuff with New World Order. So if this sounds like a high-profile person using code language that could possibly be pedophilia, all of a sudden it plays right into all of the pre-existing narratives that they have regarding what they call the New World Order. On the left, you have a pre-existing narrative that's being advanced about Russia and fake news and real news and fake news, the debate going on with that. And there is, I was talking to Nathan, and Nathan said he watched an NPR piece about it, and I asked if certain names were mentioned, like Brittany Pettibone or David Seaman or Mike Cernovich, names that are popularizers of this. And he said, no, their focus was on a fake news guy that created a fake news site and was pushing things to do with that. And I said, that's their pre-existing narrative, that it must be that's causing it. I'm like, well, no, there's actual WikiLeaks that have a code. So it's an unknown thing already from the get-go.
And what it is I truly believe it's very akin to when people see something in the sky that has bright lights and is shiny and they don't know what it is. Instead of saying, that's a UFO as an unidentified flying object, I don't know what that is, they'll say, that's a UFO. It must be aliens from billions of light years away that flew here to do experiments on us and test us and look at us. And it's like, that is postulation through the core. What you know is you saw blinking lights in the sky that you don't recognize. That's as far as the assumption goes. That you are, to tack on past that is massively being irresponsible. And it's the same thing with Podesta's emails. Seeing that coded language, yes, there's coded language, yes, there's something that's there, but to dance on the assumption that we know what it is, we know where it's going, and we connected it with the Illuminati, all that jazz that people have been trying to connect it with, that is a significant problem, right? I think that's where the discourse dances.
Yeah, and you got, when people start throwing in things like Lolita Island, I mean, that's a legitimate thing for people to investigate. Epstein and the whole connection with that.
Yes.
MK Ultra. I mean, that's something that, if I remember correctly, that Clinton himself, Bill, when he was president, addressed. You have the videos of a strange comedian, right? There's kind of a weird. It's all weirdness. Everything's a little strange. That's what it is. It's fishy. There's these comedians. There's perverted pictures on Instagram. There's the weird art at Tony Podesta's house. The wanted pictures from the UK that look like John and Tony, although the official statement is that it's the same person. It looks it literally does. Like, you can look at it and put Tony and John, the two Podesta brothers, put them up there, and it's like, whoa, this is a big deal. Plus the fact that, people can go online and they're seeing huge pedophilia rings being busted in many different countries around the globe right now, including high-profile...
In Canada.
Canada.
It's a huge one.
I think there was one in Australia. I think there was one... it was one in England.
Well, and hey, for the folks that are listening here in Michigan, listening live on WPRR, first of all, thank you. But secondarily, Michigan is one of the top 5 sex trafficking states in the United States. We are very involved with it, particularly from Detroit into Ontario and into Canada. That is a huge thing, that is a problem in Michigan that most people don't even know, that sex trafficking, 1, is a serious problem, and 2, that it's a big one here in Michigan.
Yeah, and you got this, the whole idea here of what's in Pizzagate. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry about that. My wife came in here with a bunch of goodies in her hand, and I got
you can't avoid the goodies.
She's gorgeous.
You can't avoid the goodies.
She's gorgeous. Let me see here. What do I want?
Thank you, Angela.
I'm going to go with the can of Coke here. All right. So like for Jones to come in and say things like innocent people can get wrapped up in all of this, I think that's actually a prudent statement. I think that's a healthy thing for him to recognize, is that wild conspiracy theories can actually have consequences.
It's extremely healthy for a man like him to recognize that.
Right. And he says these things need to be investigated judiciously.
Yes.
And I thought, yes, that's true, but how do you wrangle that?
Well, and how do you wrangle that? And the other question is, in a way, I would say, with all due respect to Alex Jones, it's a bit of the pot calling the kettle black. It's a bit of the pot calling the kettle black in the sense of Alex Jones did do Pizzagate. He talked about Pizzagate at great length in InfoWars beforehand and made all those postulations and all those connections and laid it out for everyone the way it should be. And then when something actually happened at that pizza shop where a person went in there armed, now Alex Jones goes on video and says, hey, wait, this actually has people involved.
Well, to his merit, he had a guy who was a patron there at the pizza place when that all went down. He had him on the show, interviewed him, gave him a long time and allowed him to talk. And that guy, it was interesting. The guy said he never heard any gunshots. He said nobody in his party, nobody that was with them heard any gunshots, but he heard later that there was a gunshot. But he had him on, and the guy spent most of his time talking about how it's irresponsible to advance conspiracy theories like that. That was what that guest, but he actually had the guest on and was listening to him, fought back a lot too, saying, I'm not the one saying this is the case, and he was trying to distance himself as being the primary popularizer of Pizzagate, and he's not. That's what I'm saying.
That's like, right.
It's weird when you have media sources that should be investigating judiciously, and they come out with stories that don't have the actual popularizers on them. They don't have screenshots of, like the alt media and new media do, screenshots of the verified WikiLeaks emails with the weird code in them, and the pictures of the Instagrams and all this stuff, and saying, I wish that the mainstream media would do that and at least inform people, so that way it's at least a well-informed debate and you don't have these two completely conflicting narratives.
Yes, and that's the issue with media today, is that it's always two completely conflicting narratives. You don't have people that meet themselves in the middle. But there is a serious responsibility involved with conspiracy theories, propagating them, using a little bit of evidence to go a long way for people, getting an inch, taking a mile sort of things in media. It's a big problem that we need to address.
We'll be right back right after this. We're now a 2-hour show. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to Paleo Radio.
You've been listening to Paleo Radio, exclusively with Secular Media Group.
We're passionate about compassion. This is Public Reality Radio, WPRR AM 1680 Ada, and FM 95.3 Grand Rapids, WPRR FM 90.1 Clyde Township, and WPJC FM 88.3 Pontiac, Illinois.
It's time for Paleo Radio, only on Secular Media Network.
You are now entering Paleo Radio.
Welcome to Paleo Radio with your hosts Jeremiah Bannister and Joe Elder.
Welcome back to the second hour of Paleo Radio. Hey, the wonders of live radio.
Yeah.
Apparently we had a couple bumpers that were missing, but hey, we can adapt.
Right.
We can move. Adapt or die, as they say.
We got the top of the hour in. That's so important. You're welcome, FCC.
Yes, and you know what? It is perfect because we had a caller waiting on the line that doesn't have to wait their extra 2 minutes. We have Rick on the line. How are you doing, Rick?
He's listening on AM. Thank you so much for tuning in, Rick.
Hey, Rick, how are you?
Hello, Joe and Jeremiah.
Hey, you got to turn down your radio.
How you doing?
I don't have my radio on.
Okay.
Yep, we got you.
All right.
You're good.
First of all, could I just ask how you got the title for the show, Paleo Radio?
Well, that's a Jeremiah question.
I created the show back in 2006, and it was an accident, in fact. It was not planned, let's put it that way. I was on a TV show called Bannister and Sotheby. I was obviously the star. And there was my co-host, he got in trouble. He got pulled over. And they brought him in. He was a big-time guy. He had a dance club in town, kind of a pariah. So he ended up being brought in for a second, not in big trouble or anything. But I was stuck, and it was before any kind of cell phones. And we were stuck. And so I'm like, man, what am I going to do? I'm here at the station. It's going to be live. What am I going to do? So we ended up making it this thing where I looked like I was on radio. Okay, so I wasn't really on radio at all. I had cameras on me. I had a headset. I made it look like we had commercials. It was completely fake, right? 100%. And I called it Paleo Radio because my nickname has been, since about 2003, Paleocrat. And I created that word to differentiate myself from the Republicans and the Democrats. I didn't consider myself a liberal, a libertarian, or a conservative. And so I smashed Latin and Greek together in order to make room for myself in the political community. So Paleo Radio, it means the ancient law, Paleocrat. It's the ancient law or the old order. And Paleo is simply looking at events through the lens of science, through the lens of history, and realizing that we're not a new thing. And there's a lot we can learn from the past and how that can inform what we believe now.
I see. Okay, you're talking about conspiracy theories.
Yes.
I'm a firm believer that although I don't think everything is a conspiracy, I think people that say there is no such thing as a conspiracy are wrong, too. For instance, I think the most logical conspiracy theory you might want to come up with is that people with money rule the world. I mean, like the old saying goes, the golden rule, he who has the gold rules. The term international bankers has been used, but some people think that's kind of a euphemism for Jewish people. Now, no doubt there are some Jewish people that are bankers, but I would guess the majority of them are probably Anglo-Saxon.
Yes.
Now, you mentioned Alex Jones. Now, I know this conspiracy stuff kind of goes along the continuum. You've got the John Birch Society, and by the way, I'm reading a book about that, just before I called you guys.
Mm-hmm.
I was listening to you and reading the book. I can multitask at times.
Look at you.
Anyway, they are actually a little more reasonable than some of these wacky things. There's the LaRouche organization, if you've ever heard of him.
I have not.
There's the Communist Party itself, which, by the way, on the left is relatively moderate compared to some of these Maoist outfits.
Absolutely.
But then we get into the real wacky realm of Alex Jones, and then even further along than Alex Jones, there's this guy in England, David Icke.
Oh yeah, he's lizard people.
Yeah,
Ike.
lizard people.
That's what I was going to come up with. It's
Yes,
the lizard deal.
Yeah.
And I'm getting
It's craziness.
I'm getting a catalog from some group called ISA. I don't know I'm assuming it's an acronym, but these folks not only believe in the lizards, they believe in the hollow earth theory and the flat earth theory.
Yeah, everything at once, right? Even contradicting conspiracy theories are true.
Michelle Obama is really a man.
Yep. Chemtrails, right? They're dropping
Chemtrails,
chemicals, the whole shebang.
Now, I'm just wondering what you guys think if you study it this closely. Is some of this stuff intentionally wacky, you think, just to discredit the more credible conspiracy theories?
Well, Alex Jones is obviously Bill Hicks. I mean, this has been a...
He's fat.
Well, wait a minute. Who's Bill Hicks?
Bill Hicks is an old comedian, a classical comedian from the 90s who passed away way too young from cancer in his 30s.
And there's videos online where you can go and see Alex Jones and Bill Hicks side by side. Plus, isn't his former manager the manager for Alex Jones?
He may be.
I think he is.
Well,
I think
Bill Hicks
Hicks
is from
former
Texas.
manager. Yes, and he's from Texas. And you've got these videos where they just go off the handle and they got these images with their faces next to each other. It's a big conspiracy. Alex Jones knows he's busted. It's just a matter of time. But yeah, probably.
But back to your point, Rick. I think that it reminds me of something that Neil Postman said, who is a guy who talks about communication theory and media and its impact on societies. And he says that there is a serious issue with disinformation, which is not misinformation. Misinformation is giving you something that's wrong, telling you that, there's a McDonald's 4 miles away when there's actually not.
Right.
Disinformation is telling you about a different McDonald's, a different way away to lead you away from the story. It's intentionally misguided. Now, I personally think that the reason why conspiracy theories are so outlandish is because people have a tendency to act upon a very little bit of evidence and fill in the gaps themselves. And some people are willing to reach really, really far to make their ideas come together. So whether it has to be aliens that made the pyramids to make the pyramids here, or it has to be lizard people to make Agenda 21 real, I mean, people reach. And they're willing to go anywhere with a tiny bit of evidence, and that's the problem.
There's a book called Ruled by Secrecy.
I have that book.
You have that book, and that book makes a claim in the beginning for...
Can we give the author a plug?
Yeah, go for it.
Jim Marrs?
Yeah, Jim Marrs. And he makes the case for a conspiratorial worldview in the beginning. And he compares it to the accidental, what he calls the accidental worldview, right? It's just kind of accidental. It's how things worked out. It's coincidental in a way.
There are no coincidences.
Well, and that's where I differ. Is I say that for the argument for conspiracies to be credible, then we'd have to admit that they are an outlier. In fact, that they are not the norm. That they are fewer. There's fewer than are claimed. Right, that much fewer than are claimed, and so I think
that's a great point, though. Is that I think that there are absolutely conspiracy theories that are real. Now that doesn't open the door to the lizard people. That's an outlandish claim that requires extraordinary.
I don't know, Joe.
It requires extraordinary evidence, right? Yeah. But there are things that we've come to find out, like the Gulf of Tonkin incident. The U.S. releases that never happened. That was a false flag. That
even the blowing up of the Maine in 1898, there's some suspicion about that.
So, and also just looking at how World War II got started, why did the Germans pump into Poland? What was their reasoning for it? Well, the Germans dressed up like Polish people at an outlet, and they dressed like Polish army vets. They ended up bombing certain places and saying it was done by the Poles, and then they invaded. I mean, that type of thing happens, right? But the question is, I would say, the more people get into saying that there's actually a puppeteer, there's a puppet master that says, today we're going to do this false flag, and tomorrow will be this one, and that all the game is laid out in some sheet that we can't see, I'm very skeptical of that. I think it's much more likely that people are acting on their own selfish accord, and they're acting individually for their own selfish reasons with whatever power and influence they have, and that by nature makes basically a dystopian society.
That's true enough, but it's just like if you can use the analogy of organized crime. A lot of these gangs, and back in the 30s and so forth, and still are probably at war with each other as well as the police. But once in a while, they unite for a common purpose. And I think that. For instance, I guess you don't think that David Rockefeller is the most powerful man in the world. He's 100.
Well, I do. I think that banking. I do think that banking has a serious impact on the world. But I also would say that the banks in China have nothing to do with the banks in England.
He's on his what?
And they oppose each other.
Not yet.
He's on his what? 8th heart transplant? Something like that?
I don't know about that, but I was going to bring up the most famous conspiracy, of course, in our lifetimes. Or I don't know how old you guys are, but it's in my lifetime at least.
Okay, yeah, we can take that, and then we'll have to let you go.
Yeah,
okay.
Final thought.
The 1963 assassination of John F. Kennedy, of course.
Absolutely.
Now, here's the thing. The President of the United States, John F. Kennedy, and his Vice President, LBJ, it's no secret, we're not exactly friendly. So the President of the United States goes to the Vice President's home state of Texas, where there was a lot of discontent against Mr. Kennedy, and he gets assassinated, and Mr. Johnson becomes president. Now, that almost seems too simple, but isn't a lot of times when people look at so-called conspiracies, sometimes they get rather convoluted, but sometimes the most simple explanation is the right one. So maybe, John F. Kennedy, for whatever reason, went to his vice president's home state, and he was offed, and then LBJ became president. Well, why is that so outlandish?
Yeah, well, I don't think it is. But the other thing, too, is it terribly outlandish to take a guy who has been indoctrinated by communism that already attempted to take the life of a military sergeant the week before and hit the middle of the windowsill? Is it very unlikely to think that that person could have acted alone? I mean, that's the thing about conspiracy theories, is just as likely as it is that, say, Johnson wanted that to happen, it's very likely that Lee Harvey Oswald acted on his own accord. He was someone who was capable of making those shots. They knew he was. And
So why was he bumped off?
Well, there you go, right?
See?
But here's the other thing, too, about conspiracy theories, and this is the position we have to think of ourselves in, is if there's not enough evidence to take us there, we don't really want to dance around in the what could have beens. The coulda, shoulda, wouldas aren't necessarily fact. The facts are JFK was killed, Jack Ruby killed Lee Harvey Oswald, and there's some definite questions about that, but we really can't dance one way or the other as to what truly happened.
Thank you so much for that phone call, Rick. We appreciate it big time.
Thank you, Rick.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for tuning in. You're listening to Paleo Radio on Mondays, live 10 to noon, with a replay from 10 to midnight. You can call us, 616-656-1680. We've talked about a bunch of topics here, Joe. We've talked about Trump columnists. The mainstream media is really looking for somebody. We've talked about Pentagon and the Waste. We've talked about Pizzagate. Talked about that. We've talked about a bunch of things. If you would like to touch on any of those, you're welcome to call 616-656-1680. When we get back, we're going to talk about big news. The whole debate over Russia and their involvement in meddling in election 2016 is taken to a new level. We'll be back.
Yes, it is. It's taken to an absolutely new level. Stick around, folks. 616-656-1680.
Radio? Join the club. Support our work by visiting patreon.com/Paleo Radio today.
Back to Eagle and Dragon.
Welcome back to Paleo Radio, 95.3 FM, 1680 AM. We've been discussing a whole bunch of different topics today, but the one we want to get into right now is Russian hackers acted to aid the Trump election, the U.S. says. This is from the CIA. And this is out of the New York Times by David Sanger and Scott Shane.
Yeah. And, I'll tell you, man, this whole thing with Russia is pretty intense. And I'm starting to see the Ruskies everywhere I go. I mean, they're around every corner, under every stone. Yep. And I'm starting to see, for example, here is one that just sticks out like a sore thumb, is Greg Gutfeld. Mm-hmm. I outed that guy on Facebook. He's done. His career is over.
He's done. You've nixed him.
You're finished, Greg. And I wrote this. Need more proof? Greg Gutfeld is full-blown Illuminati. He's never even heard of Carl's Jr. Neither is former Ambassador John Bolton, by the way. So elitist. Bohemian Grove type, probably. It pains me to say it, folks, but it may be time for us to pull the plug on the old Greg Gutfeld.
That's right. If he doesn't know Carl's Jr. in affiliation with Hardee's, then how does he know the average American man?
He doesn't understand Johnny Q and Sally Sue on Main Street for the life of him. I mean, if you're sitting there and you're like, hey, I've never heard of Carl's Jr., what's that? And you're like, dude, it's burgers.
Yes.
We're talking hamburgers, man.
American burgers.
We're talking Hardee's, dude.
Yeah. How can you not know that?
Yeah, how can you not know that?
You say you're an everyman.
It blows my mind. So obviously he's a plant, some kind of agent. Greg Gutfeld, you're toast.
Oh, loving every minute of it. So, again, New York Times article by David Sanger and Scott Shane. Russian hackers acted to aid Trump in election, the U.S. says. This is out of Washington. Mm-hmm. American intelligence agencies have concluded with, quote, high confidence that Russia acted covertly in the latter stages of the presidential campaign to harm Hillary Clinton's chances and promote Donald J. Trump, according to senior administration officials. Mm-hmm. They base that conclusion in part on another finding, which they say was also reached with high confidence, that the Russians also hacked the Republican National Committee's computer systems in addition to their attacks on Democratic organizations, but did not release whatever information they gleaned from Republican networks.
And by the way, this is hotly denied by the RNC. In fact,
hotly denied.
In fact, the RNC is openly working with the intelligence community right now and trying to be as transparent as possible. I heard this debate back and forth, and he said there's no evidence that the RNC's system was hacked, that their people said that they were not hacked. I mean, that would be sensitive information. That would be.
Well, and there is also the articles that were released this August of Russian websites that are connected with hacking that released RNC documents. That happened this August. So, I mean, they can say they didn't, but somehow on a Russian hacking site, they came up with RNC emails.
There was one senior government official, and see, this is why even this article You know, and this is an important one. This is, where is this here? New York Times.
Yes.
Okay, this is New York Times. But we're talking, remember, we've been talking about real news, fake news, anonymous sources, claims tucked down further down in. And here's one that was kind of tucked in here. One senior government official briefed on the FBI investigation says that Russia tried but was unsuccessful.
Yes.
So you have these competing narratives even internally that are kind of tucked in to this entire thing. And it's like, you know, the New York Times has a narrative that they're running with, but within that narrative are a lot of people. And again, anonymous people. And I should say this, that this article came on our radar because of Justin Amash.
Yes.
Yes. And Justin Amash, he wrote this, quote, "If intel community has evidence, it should be shared immediately with all of Congress. Be skeptical of any claims from anonymous officials. Transition team's dismissive statement doesn't cut it." So he's criticizing Trump, too.
Yes.
Transition team's dismissive statement doesn't cut it. Congress must determine if there's credible evidence and investigate if necessary. And I agree. I literally agree 100%
I do
with
too.
that, his sentiment.
I think even right now, we are... we're dancing a little bit by just talking about it as early as we are, because the CIA is apparently putting together a dossier to be passing on that as much as they can possibly make it is going to be public. And that's supposed to be where we're going to see a little bit more evidence there, which I think we should have. One thing, though, that does concern me is the narratives of it. This mixes in with media as well. But when the media is so bad at dispelling bad information, and they are it's a complicated system about just letting out the truth, really, and that people don't trust media institutions. What would it take, literally, what would it take for people to believe that Russia was involved in it? If the CIA comes out and they release a dossier, and the dossier has proof that they used Fancy Bear, which is a hacking site, which uses cover, and this is what the CIA was talking about when I was looking at their briefing. The way that Russians particularly hack is they steal Hotmail accounts or email accounts by creating a fake Google page or a fake Hotmail page that's your login, and there's only tiny little differences in it, maybe in the URL, but it looks exactly like it, and you log in and you enter in your password. They use that information and they screen that password and then have access to it. That is how the CIA says John Podesta lost his emails. They said that's exactly how he did it, is that he lost it by signing into a front page that wasn't his. So the MO fits a type of hacking strategy that Russians use. But the point being is, I want to wait to see what happens with more evidence here. But when we talk about the plausibility, is it plausible that Russia did this? Well, I don't know. When the Pentagon Papers came out, about a year before that, Vladimir Putin said that was directly U.S. cyber attacks on Russia, and that every other country involved was just an offset. The goal was U.S. cyber intelligence attacking Russia to dismiss Vladimir Putin because he had a lot of money hidden offshore there. And he said it was done to basically dispel the Russian people, and that Russians they've acknowledged it, and they are going to start cybersecurity attacks back. They're going to defend themselves. In the next year, U.S. isn't the only one. Germany, Italy, France, United Kingdom, plenty of areas have all alleged that Russia has been hacking into their institutions. So the U.S. isn't an outlier. They're not on their own in this assumption that Russia has a huge cyber industry that they're running and a huge cyber security threat.
What it's going to take, you asked the question, what is it going to take for people to believe it? I think Glenn Greenwald, I think what he said, there's a quote I was reading from him in response to this. I think that this kind of explains where I'm coming from. Quote, "The key claims of this article are based exclusively on the unverified assertions of anonymous officials, who in turn are disseminating their own claims about what the CIA purportedly believes, all based on evidence that remains completely secret. Indeed, the CIA's secret assessment itself remains concealed." And so there's identified high-profile Russians involved. They won't identify them publicly. So as with any conspiracy theory, and this is actually, I think, maybe a good reluctancy and a hesitation by the people, is to say, yeah, I'm hearing a lot of this anonymous source here, anonymous source there, making anonymous allegations here, making, this and that. And them saying, listen, you want us to believe this, Okay, this is a conspiracy theory. This really would be. And that's not to discredit it. As soon as, I've said it on the air, as soon as people start talking about geopolitics, welcome to the world of conspiracy. Because that's where the world of spies are.
Yes.
I mean, you don't have too many of those on a local level, getting into the Drain Commission.
Yeah, but I think the other thing though too is they're not anonymous sources. They're not all anonymous sources. You have the Department of Homeland Security and Director of National Intelligence releasing a joint statement accusing Russia of interfering with the American electoral process.
But that's the whole point, though, is you say, I mean, we can find people who make allegations, but when you say, all right, what is the actual evidence of this? And for months now, it has been, we'll give you the evidence, And so far,
what about Michael McCall, who's the RNC's Homeland Security guy, who says on MSNBC that they were hacked, and then an hour later retracts it? He says online or on CNN that they were indeed hacked by Russians, and he went into further detail about it, but then an hour later he walks it back.
I haven't seen that.
This is out of CNN. A Republican congressman said he misspoke when he asserted the Republican National Committee's data had been hacked, amending his remarks shortly after the top RNC official disputed his statement. GOP Representative Michael McCall, chairman of the House Homeland Security Committee, told CNN's Wolf Blitzer Wednesday in the Situation Room that he learned from intelligence briefings that hackers have targeted the RNC similarly to how they struck the Democratic Party. He says, quote, yes, they've hacked into the Republican National Committee. So this, again, they're not picking sides here, I don't think. They're hacking to both political parties. We're not sure what they've released and we're not sure why they've released some documents and not others. He continued and said, quote, what we don't know is the extent of damage done and what they were able to retrieve out of the RNC itself. That, again, is subject to an FBI investigation. He also said, quote, there's been no known breach. This is Sean Carncross, who said right after he got off the air, there's been no known breach of the RNC's cyber network, the RNC's chief operating officer.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's the interview I saw. I didn't see the interview you mentioned.
The chief operating officer says there's no breach whatsoever, but the guy that actually sits in intelligence briefings for the RNC's Homeland Security said there was. And this is what you're talking about by getting into the big game, right? And hey, look, I think this is something that I have to say on the air that I think is very valid. When President Obama was debating Mitt Romney in the 2012 elections, Mitt Romney said that Russia was one of the bigger threats to the United States. And Obama kind of chided him and said, it's not the 1960s anymore, yada, yada, yada. Since that's happened, since Obama said that statement, Russia has invaded Crimea. Russia has started a proxy war in Ukraine. Pentagon papers have come out saying that Vladimir Putin was storing money offshores in the southern South America, which really affected him politically in a way. Russia cut off all communications with the United States for the last 2 months of the presidential election. They were not communicating with anyone. Russian jets have been doing heavy flyovers in the Bering Straits and in the Black Sea of U.S. Officials. In Switzerland, they found Russian submarines in their water space. The UK had the same thing happen to them. Mm-hmm. This is one thing I just have to say that's important is Obama was wrong there. Mitt Romney was right. Russia is heavily considering geopolitical moves. They're doing it. They're being sanctioned by us. We shrank their GDP to the size of Spain 2 years ago when they invaded Ukraine. You think that didn't upset Russia? You think they don't have a bone to pick with us over that? Shrinking that country that big to the GDP size of Spain, you're going to get a retaliation from that, certainly, especially a country that thinks that they're geopolitically involved.
The only thing is it reminds me of the conversations that we have, when Rick called. And again, thank you, Rick, for the phone call, 616-656-1680. But when people say, well, hey, there's incentive here. This person would benefit from that. That's a key question, but I don't think that that's sufficient.
What about people in Donald Trump's campaign, Paul Manafort, getting let go because of his affiliation with Russian corporations when he worked?
There
is with John Podesta.
Right, I agree. Hey, both of them
That's
do,
right.
And I'd say yes. Is that a good thing? No way. At the same time, I'd say at least one of them was gone. I mean, Podesta stayed the whole time. He's like he didn't feel the pressure.
That's right.
To leave. Whereas Manafort, he should have. You know, I mean, if that's the way the game's being played,
it should be played.
Then it's how it's being played. You know, but I look at it like this, and I say those otherwise disparate points, those points of reference that we say, here's incentive, here's who would benefit, here's this, here's that, here's this evidence over here, here's that. We can tie those together, but really, I'm with Greenwald on this. I say I don't want to make too quick of a statement regarding what has happened as a historical statement of fact, because right now, anyway, we have a lot of allegation, we have a lot of innuendo. We have that's kind of what all of this is wrapped up in. It's all very secretive. There's a lot of this high profile official, this anonymous source. There's a lot of that. And I think it's a valid thing to say proof in a digital age where people want transparency and people are starting to demand more than just simply your assurance, especially when it comes from organizations. And whether or not Trump was right to say this, he at the same time, there's a point to this where he says these are the same people that said Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction.
Well,
now,
not really. It's 8 years different.
Right.
How many of those same people are still in the intelligence briefings room?
But he's talking about
he's talking about disenfranchising an institution's credibility, not the institution itself. Those are all different people that work for the CIA, but he's saying, well, who can trust the CIA? Was he saying that about the FBI's findings on Hillary Clinton's emails? Who can trust what the FBI has to say about such a thing? I mean, he's discrediting the institution.
Yeah.
And
which is not good for a president-elect to do.
No.
Let me make that very clear. But in the mind of a lot of people, they can look back and say, man, you know, I remember these situations where we were misled, or I remember the disinformation that came out, right? The misinformation that came out that led to costly things, and for some people, deadly things. Mm-hmm. And it's not so easy for them. They have a lot of distrust, and some of it's earned distrust to say, man, you know, when you are in a shady world, part of that's just going to happen. You know, you're gonna, if your world is that of shadows and shade, then yeah, you're gonna have that kind of stuff happen. But when you bring it on yourself, you know, I don't know. I'm not saying what Trump did or what he said about the institution is a good thing. In fact, let me go on record and say it's not, right? But in the minds of people, when they're trying to trust institutions, it's like the Catholic Church. A lot of people don't trust the Catholic Church because of stuff that maybe other priests did. And they said, man, but I remember this. Now, there are a lot of good priests, and you know what? Maybe, you know, for a Catholic person, they still believe in the integrity of the institution itself. But it's understandable that people who are affiliated or around it can be scandalized. And I think that people, and the American people, have been scandalized by the establishment, whether the CIA, Department of Homeland Security, the presidential branch, the media, anybody.
They have a reason to be skeptical. I agree to that. My concern is that I believe already, with the evidence that I've been looking at and from what I've seen, I believe it's it's very plausible to lay it out that yes, indeed, it happened. Cozy Bear and Fancy Bear are two cyber industries that are very well recognized, and even have an acronym that the CIA uses when they see their URLs and their searches and what they look into. And they said, "There's the connection. We see it." There's Cozy Bear and Fancy Bear, two hacking agencies that work for the Kremlin as contractors, that their URLs are all over the place here.
I'd like to know what server. Like, they have to be able to identify that, because there was a list that was published recently within the last 2 months that are compromised servers that America controls in foreign countries.
Yes.
And so you have, for example, you have a bunch surrounding Russia. You have some in Russia. You have some in China.
Well,
and I would just like to know, and this is a totally reasonable question, is to say, what server did this come from? And because we at least have something to bounce that off of, and to say that's not a compromised server.
Absolutely. Well, and I also think, too, the truth is that we here in America believe that we are the only one capable of meddling in the elections of others and getting who we want elected through means that aren't military coups. We think in America we're the only geopolitical player that has the capabilities of doing such a thing, and that's a joke. That's a joke. We're as susceptible to it just like anybody else. Dude, we look at Germany and Germany's concerns with their elections right now. their cybersecurity teams are on high alert. And, hey, maybe they've been incorrectly prompted by the U.S., but their security firms are on high alert for re-election because they're very concerned that Russia's going to get involved in cyber attacks with their election cycles, too. And they said that this is something we seriously have to consider. That doesn't mean that it's totally happening. But I will say, how would we prove that the Pentagon or the Panama Papers were indeed seized by American intelligence and released to discredit Russia? Well, we can't prove that. There's not a way. Russia hasn't been able to prove that that's what happened. But one thing they do know that happened is somehow WikiLeaks got a hold of Panama Papers through some very high-level hacking that they thought some institutional work to get it. And it was given to them at a strategic time during election cycles in Russia. And I think we find ourselves in the same position now. We find ourselves in the position of you have what you think is going on. How does Russia prove that we did that? They really can't. And how are we going to prove that they did it? We really can't. I mean, this is the problem about cybersecurity in terms of you can connect it to Cozy Bear, but you're not going to say it was Vladimir Konstantinov of Ukraine who's in the northeastern sector on this computer who did it. That's not how the internet works. That's why cybersecurity is the number one thing in military defense going through the roof in payment right now, is because obviously there's geopolitical games being played with it, I believe. And that's something, this is a bone here, right? This is playing fair, is to say, as a reminder to a lot of people that WikiLeaks is kind of a proxy war in and of itself. A lot of countries are using them as tools to publish things. They certainly can be a tool. And so if America, if our leaking has resulted in problems in the Russian election, and their stuff has resulted in problems in ours, this is a can we've opened up, and we got to deal with it. Yeah, it's a lot of work. Hey, stick around, folks. We'll be right back. 95.3 FM.
Now back to Joe and Jeremiah.
I want to give a huge shout out to Jill Cook. Is it Devon? From the Apothecary off Maine. Yes. Yeah, I was in a real bind. People who are familiar with me and familiar with my life know that I live a thug beard life. I do. I look like Aristotle. And so I've got this beard going, and it's all wavy and curly, kind of looks like an old sculpture. Very sage-ish. I'm definitely a sage of the age. And so, I've got this beard thing going, but the problem is that I ran out of product. I was totally just up Crud's Creek, man. What do you do in such a case? It was all brittle and it was all hard, and now it's as soft as chinchilla. Yeah. And so super duper pumped about that. Super duper pumped that she followed us. Make sure to follow our page. You can find us at facebook.com/PaleoRadio. And of course, you can find us on Patreon. If you love this show, and I just need to take a second for this. Why not? If you love this show and you see this program as a benefit to you, you like the topics that we talk about, you like that we've gone to 2 hours now, you like that we're on from 10 to noon and from 10 to midnight as a replay, you like that we're reaching out to people now for interviews, high-profile ones, people in politics, people in religion, people in science. If this is what you like, and if you think that Paleo Radio is unique and something different, right, a special kind of snowflake in the podcast world, make sure to go to patreon.com/PaleoRadio and sign up as a member today. Yes, you want to do that, folks. The other thing, too, is if you donate over $1 an episode, which is $4 a month, basically the cost of a Sunday paper, but if you do donate over $1, we have special content that is exclusive to only our Patreon members that pay over $1, and you'll have access to that. Things like conversations that Jeremiah and I have off air in his little back room in his house when we decide to plug in. We just have some conversations. There's, when we're visiting people, videos, chats, all sorts of different things that you have access to. But you have to donate over that $1. And the reason why we do that, seriously, is because we do not want to have anything we talk about on the station get swayed or manipulated by our sponsors. And you all know that once people begin sponsorships,
there can be a problem with that. Now, it's not like we're not open to sponsorships, but we want to be very particular. The only way we can do that is if we get donations directly from the people that listen and support the show.
We want to be on the line for you. And I thought about this, and, I said to myself, I said, this is a project that we genuinely and passionately love. We genuinely love doing this program, and we're super excited that it's 2 hours. And we want to do this for a living. This is something that we genuinely want to do. And so if this is something that you're like, you know what, I would love for these guys to live a super fancy lifestyle.
Yes.
I would love for these guys to be on every day or whatever, not every day. You don't do that to us.
Don't
hurt us. Don't kill us. And so, but to have that is something that we want, and you can be part of that at patreon.com/PaleoRadio. We appreciate every single one of you. And just as a reminder again, everything that we publish is for free.
Yes.
There is no paywall there. It's simply saying we're trusting ourselves into your care. That way we never have a political or a corporate enterprise that tells us you can't talk about that.
That's right.
Never.
And that's the big focus, too, is it will always be free. We will always produce the show and give you guys the show for free. We just ask that if you like the show, you're interested in it, you like what we do, please support us. And with that, we have a caller on the line, Stan44. I know who this man is. How are you doing, Stan?
Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning, sir. How are you?
All right. Hey, I just caught the tail end of your show here. I'm not going to take up your time, but so glad to hear you guys on the air.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Two of my best favorite buddies.
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm so happy you called, Stan. For people who don't know, Stan has been a listener of the station. He's been in studio with us. Stan and I, we've been on the air together. He's a very great man. I'm happy you called, Stan. I really am.
And you have to tell everybody, Stan, why we call you Stan44.
Yes, back when you had your show years ago, right?
Yes.
And I was you used to number your callers. I was the number 44th caller. That's before I finally met you. And your friend, I forgot his name, though.
J.D. Sullivan.
J.D., yep. And but yeah, I was number 44 caller, so we went to a union meeting or something like that. And we were talking. Both of us had our mouth full. We were kind of introducing ourselves to each other. And I said, I'm number 44, call 44. You said, oh, I know you. And ever since then, we've been buddies. I tell you, I love to hear your voice on the radio, and I know everything's all right.
You're the man.
That's great.
Thank you so much for the phone call. Stan is really close. 44, I used to number the days, and I would say this is day 44 of Paleo Radio's occupation of the airwaves. And that's what it was. So he called in on day 44 of the occupation of the airwaves, and we met. I'm trying to remember. I don't know if I think it's called the Black Mixtapes or something like that.
Okay.
And it is it's about the Black Power movement in the United States, Black Liberation movement in the United States. And we went and we saw that. I don't know if it was an IGE or IWW event, but we went and saw it. And there was food there. And yes, it was totally true. We were stuffing our faces with delicious food and having conversation. And that's how I stumbled on him. So, okay, thank you for the phone call so much. Flat Earth, Joe.
Yes,
and we're only going
to
be able to get into this for a second before this, and I'm so sorry, but we might not be able to get to Rio.
We may not. You know what? I think we can close out on just the flat Earth.
And then next week we can talk about Rio because it's terrible to begin by saying that it's an underreported South problem and then end by not being able to report on it.
That's what I was laughing
There's
at.
Something
the other thing
terrible about
the
that.
other thing I was laughing at is it's not like the situation is going to change in 7 days anyway, and we're going to be able to report on. That is a very sad thing to say, but it's true.
Yeah, so I guess we're just waiting for the story to develop more.
I think that's
what's going on.
That's a very clever way of putting it.
But all right, listen, folks, this is the big deal. This is the whopper of the day. 10 easy ways you can tell for yourself that the Earth is not flat.
Oh, yes.
The evidence is right in front of you. This is by Muriel Schottlander, and if I'm pronouncing it wrong, let me know. It's over at Popular Science, but it wasn't originally published at Popular Science. It was published at Smarter Than That, and it was published in 2008. It's been lightly edited for Popular Science in light of recent interest in the subject. It's interesting, just as a forward to this, it's interesting that there is recent interest in the subject of flat Earth.
That is interesting.
That's actually an interesting thing that it's on the rise. It's trending.
Yeah,
Joe.
there's flat earthers all over the world, Jeremiah.
They are.
All around the world, really.
Social media is bringing them all together. Listen, I've got a couple that I'm actually even friends with. It's not just that I know them, but that I'm actual friends with them, and they believe this. We don't talk too much about it. I don't see them too often, but I know that they believe that, and they know that I don't. And so we went through, and I was like, well, what are these different positions that people have? And there are 10 of them, and we'll just start before we run out of time for this segment. We'll talk more about it when we get back.
Yes.
But right here, it says, on we go, the top 10 ways to know the Earth is unequivocally, absolutely, positively, 100% not flat. The first one, the moon. Okay, talking about Aristotle noticed that during lunar eclipses, right, this is when the Earth's orbit places it directly between the sun and the moon, creating a shadow in the process. The shadow on the moon's surface is round. This shadow is the Earth's, and it's a great clue on the spherical shape of the Earth.
But think about how smart. Okay, you take all of the things that we have, all the trappings we have of today to understand science and technology, and Aristotle comes up with that idea. Now, to other folks, they're like, well, that's not that big of a deal. But think about the things around him at the time and how he thought that out. It's just impressive. It's extremely impressive.
It's impressive that his eyes didn't burn out while he was looking.
But, yeah.
He's like, I'm just going to stare at this and see the shape. It's worth it.
Yes.
Yeah.
But
right, exactly.
When he notices
observational
lunar eclipses, and he says, how do I have proof when I'm this little speck on top of this crust? How can I make an assumption? He says, I'm going to wait till a lunar eclipse and I'm going to measure it. Just, to me, that sort of intelligence is just, it's impressive.
It's a lunar eclipse. Okay.
Yeah, lunar eclipse, yes.
Yeah, so since the Earth is rotating, see the Foucault pendulum experiment for a definite proof, if you're doubtful. The consistent oval shadow it produces in each and every lunar eclipse proves that the Earth is not only round, but spherical. Absolutely, utterly, beyond a shadow of a doubt, not flat. Number 2, ships in the horizon. And this is interesting. Actually, there's a cool little there's a cool little picture here that shows the sun rising, or what you'd see if a ship was coming up and going down, as well as what an ant, if an ant was walking on an orange, and what that would look like as it's coming up over that horizon line.
Yeah. Well, and that's a great way of thinking about it. We don't say that in the article. It says you say ships do not submerge and rise up again as they approach our view, except in Pirates of the Caribbean, which we hereby are assuming that's a fictitious movie, right? We don't have that going on. But the reason ships appear as if they emerge from the waves is because the world is not flat, it's round. And so when you take the example of the ant, you think you're looking at the sphere of the orange and you're waiting, and you just see the tip of the ant's head and then all of a sudden the entire body. It gives the impression that he appeared kind of out of nowhere, but no, he didn't come out from inside of the orange. He was going around a spherical orange.
Number 3, varying star constellations. The farther you go from the equator, the farther the, quote, known constellations go toward the horizon and are replaced by different stars. This would not have happened if the world was flat.
Yes. Yeah, so varying star constellations, that can prove it as well.
Number 4, shadows and sticks. It's the principle for ancient shadow clocks. If the world had been flat, then 2 sticks in different locations would produce the same shadow. Because the Earth is round, sticks placed at distant locations will throw shadows in different lengths. Number 5, seeing farther from higher. And this, again, some of this stuff is just like, it's stuff you just experience living. If you climb a hill or a mountain, you go up high somewhere. You go on a roller coaster and you can see this. The higher up you are, the farther you'll see. Usually we tend to relate this to earthly obstacles, like the fact we have houses or trees obstructing the view. But that's not the true reason. Even if you would have a completely clear plateau with no obstacles between you and the horizon, you would see much farther from greater height than you would on the ground.
Absolutely. And why? Because the Earth is a sphere. Okay, we have 5 more that we're going to continue with after the break. Stick around, folks.
Interviews or speeches, contact PaleoRadioShow at gmail.com.
You love to hate 'em, you hate to love 'em. You just can't get enough of 'em, you sick freaks. Paleo Radio's on the air.
I got to give a quick shout out to Jeffrey Saint. Posted a comment on our Facebook page. You got to check it out. It's under the post having to do with Trump transition team for energy department seeks names of employees involved in climate meetings. That's definitely going to have a chilling effect, no doubt about it. But go and check out what Jeffrey Saint had to say. Fantastic. We have a caller, though.
Yeah, we do. We have Rich on line 1. How are you doing, Rich?
Hi, you guys. Welcome back to the world of the living in radio.
Hey, thank you very much. We appreciate that.
Just whoever picked up the phone explained what happened and with Darren, and I'm sorry to hear that.
Yep.
You know, he did a lot of good, and regardless of the circumstances, he's a passionate person, and I'll miss listening to him every once in a while. You know?
Yep. Well, you know, and I've worked with Darren on Southpaws. We love Darren here at Paleo Radio. You know, circumstances withholding, he's a great person. He's a great man, and yeah, we love him here. Things change, not always the way we want them to go, but they do. So
and for those unaware of what's going on, I encourage you, go to our Facebook page. We made an announcement talking about transitions that were taking place at the radio station, having to do with management, having to do with programming. And this show being on from 10 to noon and 10 to midnight is one of those things. But we said in our statements about that in the comments section, we said that we have friends, we've got colleagues, we've got family, you know, that are wrapped up in this. And we have nothing but positive things to think and say about any of our colleagues here and the people that we've worked with. But we're also very grateful that through the transition, through the change, that Paleo Radio remained, and that Paleo Radio has been afforded an opportunity to really try hard to get access to a good audience of people that are listening during the day. It's not a graveyard or a ghost town like it was at 2 to 3 on Saturday afternoons. That's literally the worst. And so I'm grateful for this opportunity.
And I think you guys are going to do well, and I hope you bring more interesting talent on board. I think you guys are a great format for Grand Rapids. We definitely need you here. We're just inundated. I stopped listening to talk radio. I mean, I'm listening strictly to sports or music when I drive around. I can't. This is like the desert of any view outside of the right wing. So I'm glad you guys are on. And the reason why I called, I tuned in and I heard you, Jeremiah, explaining about the flat earthers. I thought you were kidding.
No. Sadly, no.
I mean, have those people seen the views from outer space, or do they not believe that we're in outer space?
They don't
either?
believe that.
Well, that's a great question, Rich, because this is kind of an odd one to start with, but whenever someone tells me that they are a flat earth believer, they do believe in flat earth, I begin the conversation by asking them if if there was no God, could humans destroy the planet? Or could humans destroy the planet without a God? And usually the answer is no. And I think that's where the whole thing starts and ends in flat earth theory, is with if you have the belief that human beings are incapable of destroying the planet, you're willing to believe all sorts of weird things about what the planet actually does.
Well, what's so surprising is where are you meeting these people? I mean,
we have quite an eclectic group of friends, Rich. I'll tell you that.
These people, I mean, they must be in some cubbyhole because you know, in the normal course of a lifetime, you know, you run into people, you start conversations. And I don't know how you get to that point where you find somebody says, you know, I believe the Earth is flat.
Yes.
Yeah, or we're not moving. And this is the last thing we can say. We got to let you go, Chuck.
Okay.
Rich, we appreciate the conversation big time. And listen, thank you so much for reaching out to us and saying the things that you said. We really appreciate it. We love doing this show, and we want to do this the best we can for as long as we can.
Yeah, and the best of luck to you guys on the radio station, because you guys are needed, so take care.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
It reminds me of a guy, Matt Singleton, a friend of mine. He's a flat earther, and he made a video where he said that he's not moving. He said he was sitting down. He was sitting down in a fast food place. He's sitting down at a table, and he's like, "I'm not moving at all. We're not spinning. I'm just completely chilling here." Yeah. All right, Chuck, we're running out of time. We only got a couple minutes, but Chuck from GR listening on FM.
Hey,
welcome to Paleo Radio.
Hey, Chuck. A couple quick things. your comment about seeing farther away reminds me. I don't know how much familiarity you have with Lansing. I grew up on the south end near Holt.
Okay.
And my parents had some pretty tall trees, but we still didn't have to climb that high in those trees to be able to see the Capitol downtown.
Yeah.
It was maybe 30 feet, and you could see all the way downtown.
That's right, because again, the Earth is a sphere, correct?
I would guess that's why it works.
Yeah.
So did you ever? Any thought? I had some thoughts on your words that were the opposites. I don't know if the ones I came up with or what they're actually thinking.
Yeah. Do you have any ideas?
Well, does past tense count? Read and read. R-E-A-D.
Yeah, I'm trying to think here. I'm trying to think what the article was for that. I'll have to post it at
okay.
We'll have to post it on our
Facebook.com/PaleoRadio.
The only other thing I could come up with was slang like bad, or words that sound the same like whole and, whole, or something's missing, and whole meaning you got the whole thing. I don't know if that's what they were thinking or not.
You're right.
Yeah, could be.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, thank you for the call.
You had me thinking for 2 hours.
Absolutely.
Right.
Hey,
Thank
that's
you.
great.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Yeah, words that mean their opposite.
Yeah.
Mental flaw. Okay, here's 14 from there. Sanction. Right? It means to, it can mean give official permission or approval. It can also mean to impose a penalty on it. Oversight. Left. Dust. Seed. Stone. Trim. There's a whole bunch, and it has a breakdown of each and every single one. And listen, I encourage people, as we're running out of time, I encourage you, go and check out this article that we've been talking about. We got through the first 5.
Yes.
And it's got ones on there like ride a plane.
Yes.
That's number 6. You've got look at other planets. I mean, it would be weird if we were something other than that.
Well, yeah. And that's the whole thing, is we're looking for a relative theory of how the entire universe works and the physics behind that. And if other planets at about a diameter of 500 miles begin to become spherical, why would we not be the same? It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah. So you've got that. You've got the existence of time zones. That's number 8.
Yes.
To say we have time zones because when the sun is illuminating one side of the spherical Earth, the other side's dark. Another point concerning time zones, the sun and flat Earth or flat spherical Earth. If the sun was a spotlight, right, very directionally located so that light only shines on a specific location, and the world was flat, we would have seen the sun even if it didn't shine on top of us. In other words, it would always be like a light in the sky.
You'd always see part of it.
You would always see part of you would always see part of the sun, it would seem.
Well, yes, and if the Earth is flat, it'd have to be extraordinarily long and wide, because if you think about the sun with the light down, and a light down on it, you'd have a consistent beam and other beams that are casting a shadow. Like if you turn a flashlight on and face it directly towards the ground, you see it cast out. So if the sun was going over a flat Earth like that, you'd always be seeing the sun. It would always be visible.
It would always be visible. Number 9, the center of gravity. There's an interesting fact about mass. It attracts things to it. The force of attraction, gravity, between two objects depends on their mass and the distance between them. Simply said, gravity will pull toward the center of mass of the objects. To find the center of mass, you have to examine the objects. You have, it goes through and says if you consider a sphere, what would happen? And if you consider a flat plane. And I think what's so cool about this is that they have these models on there that you can see, and it lays it out for you to show what would happen in a world where you don't have it's not a sphere, it would be a plane. It's fascinating. And Joe, you know what? I normally now for almost 2 years have said this is a sad thing. I'm okay with this music today.
I'm okay with it. Hey, 2 hours is a great show. Thank you guys for tuning in. We did get to cover a lot of different topics. It was a lot of fun. We're going to be back on next Monday, and our replay is going to be tonight, so check that out.
And make sure, check out on Facebook, CFI's Winter Solstice Dinner in Michigan. I'm December 14th and 17th doing a solstice story about Team Tiny Dancer.
Yes, it's going to be great. I'm also going to be at Sunday Night Funnies performing my stand-up set here this Sunday, December 18th, I believe it is. Yes, so tune in.
Radio, exclusively with Secular Media Group.